Hello, happy Life Day, and welcome to episode 94 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. We're going to take a break from my normal co-hosts, Sarah Says and Marissa, this week, but I can assure you that we have some fun content with both of them planned for the rest of the year. Today, Steven from the YouTube channel A Life in the Parks will be joining us. As a resident of the United Kingdom, Steven was recently able to make his first trip across the pond to visit Disneyland since before the pandemic. We're going to talk about all of the changes he experienced and get a first-timer's perspective on a lot of the things we discuss as regulars. Just a few things I'd like to mention before we get started. I have recently started getting very active on TikTok, which I'm using to promote the podcast. You can follow me at Tall Guy Talks Travel. You can also catch me on Twitter at Rick_ear and on Instagram at Rick Doherty TGTT. We spell Doherty Dougherty. Don't forget to find my co-hosts Sarah Says and Marissa on Twitter. Sarah is at Sarah Says 84 and Marissa is at Think Mickey Blog. I've also set the goal of 500 subscribers to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel by the end of the year. I think we can make this happen. Please make sure to hit the subscribe button. It is 100% free. Right now, it's time to welcome Steven from A Life in the Parks. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me back, Rick. Good to see you again.
So before we get into your most recent Disneyland trip, why don't you tell people who may not know about your YouTube channel what you do on that channel, because it's really kind of special.
Thanks. Basically, I set my channel up now sort of about 2.5 years ago, just because we were in lockdown and I had all these old videos that I'd taken at Walt Disney World and Disneyland and Universal, and I had these tapes lying around, and I just thought, I've got some free time. What can I do with this footage? So I decided to set up a YouTube channel and just put that stuff out there for people to see how the parks used to be, like going back to like the late 80s, pretty much until about 2010.
I know, for example, my wife, Courtney, who never really got to go until she was an adult, until we were actually married. And she likes to go to your channel and just see how different things used to be, how much they have changed over the years, because like Walt Disney himself said, it's not a museum. You have to keep changing things up to keep people wanting to come back year after year. You have to offer them new stuff, and you'll see so many different things and so many unique experiences. Some we wish we still had, some we wonder why we ever had in the first place.
Yeah, I get that. I've been looking at some old Epcot footage recently, and you look and you think, wow, that park is going to be so different once it's all been completed. It'll be like a new park almost. Like obviously you're going to have that Spaceship Earth is still to be there and World Showcase, but the bit in between, it'll just be completely different.
Absolutely, and I know a lot of people are either upset or super happy with the changes. I'm just ready for the changes to actually happen so we don't have that big construction area in the middle.
Yeah, there's some people who go there and they vlog all the changes, and you just see and think, wow, that seems to have been like a construction site for 4 years. And those walls, they're not small, are they? It's almost, during we used to go into the park and you had all those names and the pictures as you went in there, that's been taken away. And now the legacy that's been left is construction walls for 10% of the park's entire existence.
It definitely went from Hollywood Studios was the construction park, and now it's moved over to Epcot. And now with what they're talking about at Animal Kingdom, it could just go Hollywood Studios, Epcot, then Animal Kingdom, and then maybe back around again. There's always going to be one park that is going to be getting the upgrades, because by the time they get through to the third or fourth one, that first one is going to be getting kind of old at that point.
Yeah, I think that the area that I think really needs the help of Walt Disney World and bizarrely Disneyland is Tomorrowland. I think both of those areas, like I know that Walt Disney World's getting Tron, but sort of when you go into it from the hub to get to Tron, there's that whole bit in the middle, which is, unfortunately a mess. I think, Tomorrowland, what is its theme anymore? It's not the future, is it? It's not looking back to the past. It's this mishmash of, I don't know. I still can't believe this Monsters Inc. laugh floor. Like, what's that all about? It's got nothing to do with the future at all.
I feel like Epcot and Tomorrowland have always sort of had this problem where if you go with things that you're expecting in the future, well, the future eventually arises. Frontierland is looking to a time that will never exist again. So you can kind of look back on it fondly and, talk about the good aspects and not the bad aspects, and it can always exist and never get outdated. But a lot of times, Epcot over at Tomorrowland, eventually we get better technology than we're talking about in these lands. I know that in Paris, they did a really good job of going with like a retro Jules Verne style future looking from the past. But in some of these other parks, Tomorrowland at Disneyland is a hot mess. You still have the People Mover track that's there with nothing going on, and you have Autopia. I know people like Autopia and the Tomorrowland Speedway, but I think nothing about them says the future at all. I know we're kind of going off on a tangent now, but you are 100% correct. Tomorrowland needs a lot of work.
I think the real tangent is, does the construction crew of Walt Disney World go to the fifth gate, which Disney's really going to need once Epic Universe is opened in a few years' time?
And now we're talking about a whole different tangent, a whole different conversation, because I don't think that can happen until they get the Marvel rights on the East Coast. I just don't see them having enough to make a real sustainable quality fifth gate until they have Marvel. Once they have Marvel, it's almost a necessity. Give us a second Star Wars land, give us a Marvel land, and then you can build out with maybe Arendelle and some other things. But until they have those, I just don't see it being viable, and I don't see them putting in the amount of money that it's going to take to do a fifth gate if you don't have something, because Epic Universe is going to draw all of those people from Super Nintendo Land. You need that anchor IP in a new land, and I don't think Disney really has it right now because they've put their anchor IPs in their other parks.
Yeah, I think that from a personal thing, they own Planet of the Apes, and that's what I'd love to see at a park. I want to see Ape City. That's for me would be killer. As good as I love walking to the Galaxy's Edge, and you go in the corner and you see that Millennium Falcon. And even though I've seen it before, when I saw it a couple of weeks ago, it still takes my breath away. That is fantastic. That for me is what Disney do best. When you it's immersive. You are there. You are in Star Wars with tens of thousands of tourists. I get it, but you are there. It's still Star Wars.
So that's what I want to get to right now. Your recent trip to Disneyland, this got pushed back a lot because of the pandemic. Am I correct?
Yeah, it was booked just over 3 years ago. We were supposed to go the end of March 2020. We were sat in a pub 40 hours before. I'd got my suitcases down. They were packed. We thought we're going to get a drink to celebrate us being ready to go the following day to the airport. And it just flashed up on my phone. It's like, the NBA have cancelled the season, and then other things are happening. And it's like, hang on, this is not going to happen. Once one goes, Disney are going to, they're going to close for 3 weeks or whatever they were trying to convince themselves. My other half, she was straight onto Virgin Atlantic and just said, listen, we want to move our flights. Virgin were like, yeah, it's fine. So we moved it to September that year. Then it was September last year. It's been a trip, long time coming, but it was great to finally be out there and back at the parks again.
I tell this story every once in a while, but I was at Disney's Hollywood Studios, and it was the week after Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway had opened. and I hadn't ridden it yet. I didn't do the first day when everybody went and waited in the, super long line and everything. So I was about to leave Hollywood Studios, and there was a wait of 80 minutes for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. And I said, okay, it's a brand new ride. I haven't gotten to do it. I guess it's worth waiting for it and just experiencing it for the first time. When I got in line, nothing was canceled. By the time I rode the ride, the NBA had canceled, the NCAA tournament was canceled, Major League Baseball had postponed. By the time I rode the ride and then went back to Epcot because I was parked at Epcot, I was leaving Epcot when they announced Disneyland had closed, and I was home when they announced Disney World was going to be closing. Like, it all happened basically while I was waiting in line for one ride.
And you look back on that now, and it is still in my life the most surrealist thing that has ever happened. In which we just said we're going to shut down. Half of the world shut down, and you just think to yourself, how did we ever get there? And we're sort of out of it here. I was pleased. I was a bit concerned when it's California because I didn't know if they were going to be over. Sort of all of that. But yeah, it was nice to get through it. But wow, at the time it was scary times.
But now let's get to the fun stuff and talking about actually getting back to Disneyland, because after all of that time, it had to be really, really exciting. However, you're dealing with a lot of changes now. It's a lot different to go to a Disney park, especially Disneyland, right now with everything that has changed over the course of the past 2.5, 3 years. I know that you have a much stronger opinion on this than I have because we had been going back and forth about it a little bit on Twitter the other day, but you are not a fan of the reservation system. So was it difficult for you, or did you manage it pretty easily, but you just don't like it?
Part of it was on us. When we planned the trip, we weren't going to have a car, so we said, we're going to do 5 days Disney in the parks, and we're just going to crash the parks out. We looked at how hot it was going to be, and we thought, yeah, that's doable. And what happened was we get there, there's a heat wave, we do 3 days in the parks, and we are at that moment going, wow, we are fried. It was just a bit too much. I think sometimes we're British people and aren't used to it being, late 90s, 100 degrees. It was wiping us out. So my other half said, listen, what I'm going to do, I'm going to push back 2 of the dates to the end of the week. And I didn't really think it was going to be too much of a problem. There was supposed to be availability online. So we cancelled the 2 days we had, went back in to then rebook the dates which were available, and magically there's no availability again. So we'd lost those days. And yeah, when you've spent a lot of money to Disney and they're saying the next availability is going to be after you've flown home again, you start really starting to get concerned about what's happened. There was a lot of backwards and forwards online. Disney basically said, here's a phone number, call us. So we called them, and surprise, surprise, they weren't any help either. So we had some drinks booked that evening for Trader Sam's. So we basically went there, had our drinks, and went to guest services at the Disneyland Hotel, and threw ourselves at the mercy of them and just said, this is what's happening. We can't go for these 2 days. Can we rebook? Very lovely lady there disappeared out the back for probably about 20 minutes, and we're starting to get a little bit nervous. And she came out and said, it's all fixed. I can get you in on the Friday and the Saturday, which we wanted, which is fine. I was pleased with what happened. We had a great time. We didn't really need all of that grief for something which pretty much should have been able to be resolved fairly quickly. They said there was availability, then there wasn't. It's just not good enough, whether it's the computer system or whatever. But yeah, we had a great time. I think if they're going to run with that system, it probably needs a bit more work, on their end.
So what were the emotions like when you finally scanned into the park and got back to Disneyland for the first time in years?
First time in 15 years, I couldn't believe it. It's funny because the last couple of times I've been to the Magic Kingdom, the train has been down for a long time. And you get in there and the railway goes through and it toots the horn and it's like, wow, we're back. This was the first time in, say, nearly 3 years we've been in any Disney park. For me, there's always that certain feeling I get at Disneyland that I isn't quite there at the Magic Kingdom. I don't know if it's that whole this is where Walt was. He stayed at this park. There's that whole connection to him. I don't really quite get the Magic Kingdom. It always feels that that was something that was done in honor of Walt rather than it was designed by Walt himself.
I think part of the difference is that Walt Disney World is, we sometimes call it like a conveyor belt vacation, where it is designed to get a lot of people through on a daily basis. It is a vacation destination. It doesn't have that cozy feel that Disneyland has. Like, they had to turn Disneyland as the first draft, if you will, and find a way to make it this bigger vacation destination. And they did that very successfully at Walt Disney World. But what it does lose is just a little bit of that atmosphere, that little intangible star power that Disneyland has that just feels a little more special when you're there.
It's almost surreal. You're there and you're just you're relaxing and you're watching the Mark Twain come round, and there's no real difference between the Mark Twain and the Liberty Bell, but yet there is, and I don't know. I never understood what that was, but it was great, and I think that it may be slightly controversial, but I do think that the rides that they have at both parks tend to be better at Disneyland rather than the Magic Kingdom. They always feel as if they sort of cut a few corners on the Magic Kingdom versions of the rides that they've got at Disneyland.
In my opinion, Splash Mountain, soon to be Tiana's Bayou Adventure, is the only one that is better at Walt Disney World because they have the side-by-side seating instead of the Space Mountain Walt Disney World style seating that they have at Splash Mountain in Disneyland. I feel like that is one that is definitely better at Walt Disney World because of that aspect of it. But yes, things like Haunted Mansion, I feel Space Mountain is a million times better over at Disneyland. Just ask your back. And then there are some like the Little Mermaid ride, and then there are some that are basically 100% the same. But I do agree that with most of them, the Disneyland version is better. So, did you do Disneyland Park first, or was your first day starting at California Adventure?
First day Disneyland. If there wasn't the park entry system, it was old school. We would have probably gone maybe into California Adventure just to get in there, just to see World of Color, because we'd have turned up at say 6 o'clock, maybe 7 o'clock in the evening. It wouldn't have mattered to us. We could have gone and had a few hours in there and then hopped back and gone into Disneyland Park. But as the way it was now, it was like, we're not even going to bother going there. So we just met up with a couple of friends. We had some drinks in the hotel bar. Got an early night. So we were up and at them early doors to Disneyland the following morning.
So I know for a fact that this was your first time in Avengers Campus at Disney's California Adventure. So let's talk about what you thought about that. We did recently get the announcement at D23 that we are going to be getting that e-ticket ride that we were promised. But what did you think about your first impressions of Avengers Campus?
Avengers Campus. The first of all is that the ride that wasn't in Avengers Campus originally, Guardians of the Galaxy. I've never ridden that before. Effectively, that's how it was amazing to see how better that ride was than Tower of Terror. They've really upped it for Halloween. They have just a straight mission breakout in the mornings. Then they take an hour between 2 and 3. They close it. And then they turn it into Monsters After Dark, which is their Halloween overlay. So you can effectively ride 2 completely different rides within 4 hours, as we did. And that was fantastic. Really well worth going out there to see that. I thought that the Spider-Man and the CGI jumping around the buildings, that was really cool. I thought the Avengers building there was really sort of impressive for what that was. There seemed to be more characters out and about at Avengers Campus than there were at, say, at Galaxy's Edge, which I was quite surprised about. There seemed to just be these, you turn around and it was like, oh, there's Ant-Man, and then you turn around and then there was the Hulk or whatever. There just seemed to be much more a vibe. I did web slingers. I'll be honest with you, it was okay. It probably wasn't the ride that was good enough for me. I didn't really think that you had to sort of flick the webs to move boxes and bring things down. I don't know. It didn't really seem to be very intuitive to me. You were just waving your hand. They've got some like air vents, and I think we quickly worked out that you just move your hands over the air vents and it just did it all for you. So I'm not sure whether that's a spoiler for people who haven't done it, but yeah, you don't really have to be putting things towards you. Just adjust the air, and the screen will work it out.
And while you had already visited Walt Disney World's version of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, you really didn't, because the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge experience is not complete until you have ridden Rise of the Resistance. So this was your first opportunity to ride Rise of the Resistance. What did you think? How much do you love this new ride?
I was blown away by it. And I'll be honest with you, I have a bit of a rule in which I don't watch any POV, any footage of any ride I've never been on. So I've seen a couple of stills, but I didn't know the story. I thought that the entrance as you go in there and they're all the stormtroopers lined up, I thought that was a huge part of the ride, not just an area you walk through and you're on to the next part. It's like, wow, is that? And I was super impressed with that. So I just thought it was very well done. It was one of those rides for me that I got off. It's like, wow, I really need to go and ride that again. And then I thought, yeah, 90-minute, yeah, line, it's okay, I'll hang on. But yes, it was phenomenal. I know that there's criticism that it breaks down a lot and all things like that. And it was down fairly regularly when we were there. Not for a long period of time, but it seemed to be up and down. But when you're on that ride, you are absolutely there. That for me is, again, what Disney have done with Star Wars is taken what George Lucas did and just make it more and make it better. I never thought I'd say that, but I just think that in the parks, it is fantastic.
And I know over at Disneyland they have Fennec Shand and Boba Fett meeting. Did you get the chance to see those characters walking around at all?
No, to be honest with you, I was fairly disappointed with the character interactions. We saw Chewie was wandering around a bit. There was R2D2. We saw Kylo Ren and some stormtroopers up on like a high gantry, sort of looking down and gesturing to the guests in the park. But not really. It didn't seem to have a lot of that fan interaction that I witnessed when I was at Walt Disney World. One of the things I will say about it is that I'd been to Disneyland before. I knew that sort of that plot of land where Galaxy's Edge was going to go. And I thought, I wonder if it's going to be as big as it is at basically at Walt Disney World. I'm there thinking, how are they going to make it that grand? It almost feels as if it was a larger plot they built it on. It was like, wow, they've really, used that area again just so well.
I think it feels bigger because they have the third entrance at Galaxy's Edge in Disneyland. But you are right. It does feel like a more substantial land out there. But yeah, they do wonders with small amounts of space at Disneyland. They do it with everything. That's why they're like rides on top of other rides in Fantasyland. They cannot waste a single square foot at that park.
One of the things I was going through, the transition from Galaxy's Edge into Toy Story Land, Hollywood Studios. Yeah, so I kind of missed that transition. But once you've been in and you've seen there on that plot of land that they had, and you go to Cars Land at DCA, and it's like, wow, that's chalk and cheese. The effort at Cars Land is phenomenal. And, it's more of a kiddie area for the younger kids or whatever. But when I was in Cars Land, I loved that area. That was amazing. And then I look back and I thought that whole sort of Toy Story Land really should be so much more than what it is. Yeah, they seem to have not done enough there for me. Maybe they'll have better attractions there in years to come, but at the minute it does seem like it's a bit of a waste. As much as I enjoy Slinky, but there's not a lot of theming to Slinky, is there?
Every once in a while, because I am way more of a theme park fan than I am a movie fan. I don't sit around and watch movies a lot. Like my wife Courtney will just watch a movie because a movie's on television or something, like even if she's never really had the desire to watch it. I'm not like that. So I'm going to make a huge confession. I have never seen a Cars movie, but Cars Land is one of my favorite lands in any Disney theme park. It is so well done. Now, I used to live in Arizona, and I love that Southwest theme, that Route 66 theme, but it is just so well done. When you watch it transition from day to night and they turn on all the lights, really, really something to see.
A friend of mine, Jim from Anaheim Park Tourist, they do a lot of stuff there. He said to me, like you've got to try to upload the video. YouTube didn't like the song and said it was blocked in all countries. It's like, my God, I've never known that. So I'm going to have to find a different song, to put over that video.
Such a better experience. Like, Test Track is fine and Test Track is fun, but that Radiator Springs Racers, when you come out and you first see all that rock work when you're coming around in the car, and when you do it at night, like, that's the one ride that you have to ride at least multiple times, at least twice on your trip, because you have to do it in the day, you have to rope drop it one day, and make sure that you get on it by doing it first thing. But then you have to find a time to do it at night because it is gorgeous.
It was one of those areas in where I just felt that the attractions are great. The Maters and Luigi's are just fun rides as well. But I could just sit there, and we just spent time just soaking that area in. And it's like, sometimes you don't need all the whiz bang and all of that. Sometimes you just want to just be at the park and just soak it all in. And that was one of those areas where we could just do that. We just found somewhere to sit, just to people watch, to chill out. Yeah, I really, really thought that was something that had been done just so well.
What were some other pleasant surprises that you had over the course of your trip? There are always those magic moments that you're not expecting, or that ride that 15 years later you appreciate more than the last time you experienced it 15 years earlier.
Always Pirates. I adore Pirates at Disneyland. That long sort of windy start to it, and you go past the restaurant. There's almost this sort of tension that gets built there. I think sometimes at the Magic Kingdom, it's a bit sort of, you go through and suddenly you get on the dip and it's all a bit sort of sped up. So that's always great. One of the areas I really like to spend time at is New Orleans Square. Again, it's somewhere that has just been very well done. We had like a couple of meals there. One place that was really, really good was there was an area. I'm terrible with all these names for places these days. All this new stuff they've got at the back of sort of what is by Pixar Pier, where they've got some restaurants and they had some Mexican music playing, and that was all new to me. And again, like, as much as I like to say before, the rides are great, but especially at Disney parks, I want to soak in more of what Disney are doing. And it was great for that. I enjoyed World of Color. I think I'd have enjoyed it more a few years ago. I think that needed an update. Something else, Fantasyland there. The new Snow White was amazing. I really enjoyed Snow White. It was great to do Mr. Toad again. It was great to do Pinocchio again. Those rides got taken away. Sometimes you think the Magic Kingdom, you didn't need to take so much stuff away. There needs to be more. One of the things I really like doing is the monorail, because obviously the monorail there goes through the park itself, and I really enjoy that. Like, I think as you get older, maybe it's not necessarily all the things that throw you around that excite you. Sometimes it's the more chilled out parts of life, I think.
So I have a couple things to interject to what you were saying. That wharf area where you get the food by Pixar Pier, that's actually the area that's going to be turning, at least according to the D23 announcements, into San Francisco from Big Hero 6. So
okay.
That is going to be exciting to hopefully keep a lot of those restaurants there, but add a little bit of excitement to it, because right now it is just kind of a little corner there that's sitting with just some restaurants. So hopefully it brings some excitement to that part of the park. The other thing is, I love this story about the Disneyland monorail. Back when it was Vice President Nixon, before he was president, before he ran for president, he was at Disneyland and they were showing him the monorail, and they opened the doors and he jumped in before his Secret Service jumped in and they started the monorail. So he actually made a loop around Disneyland without his Secret Service, and they were not happy about it, apparently. That is just one of those really interesting stories about Disneyland. And that was years before he went to the Contemporary Resort at Walt Disney World and said he was not a crook.
That's right, yeah.
A lot of Richard Nixon Disney trivia that I like to spout anytime I have the opportunity. So were there any things besides the reservation system that sort of disappointed you, that didn't live up to your expectations, that you remembered being better, or now in a reopening world with all of the changes are different and you don't necessarily like them?
I wasn't too thrilled about paying $30 to park my car on the day that I parked the car. It just seemed really expensive. In the parks themselves, I know what Lightning Lane is. It's basically price gouging, but I like to try that. We did that the second time we did Rise of the Resistance, just because that was our last day at Disneyland and we wanted to ride it again. And you're there trying to think, how can I cram everything into this day? Because I don't know when I'm going to be coming back here, because we'll probably go to Walt Disney World next year. I don't like to be critical of something without trying it. Lightning Lane's great. Is it $20 or $25 great? Maybe not, but I get it. Genie Plus, I met a friend from the UK. He was in Disneyland for one day. For him, that was good because he was really, really on a time crunch. Get as much done as possible. We used it. It was a Saturday, and I thought I'm going to get quite a good use out of this, but it was bizarre. It was what was being made available to us were walk-ons. This is Saturday afternoon, and we walked on to It's a Small World. We walked on to Big Thunder. It didn't really save us a lot of time on Indiana Jones. It's pretty nice to have, but I think if you're organised, you get to the park early, you know what you want to do, you really don't need to be spending that money on Genie Plus. You can get around it as if you were somebody that had walked into a park 5 years ago and didn't know what Fast Pass was. You can still do the parks without too much stress. I know there's quite a few people from the UK who've got quite stressed about how much is this going to cost me? Do I need to do all of this expenditure and all of that? And I just have said, now I've been on it, I've tried it. I really don't think you need to spend the money on either of those things if you're well planned for your days.
I was recently talking to one of my co-hosts, Marissa, about this, and I haven't done it. I've just never done it, and it has never really affected my experience at the parks. But I'm going to say thank you so much, Stephen. It's always great to talk about Disneyland. And as somebody who's on the East Coast and only gets to go out to the West Coast every once in a while, I love talking Disneyland as much as humanly possible. Everybody go check out Stephen's YouTube channel, A Life in the Parks. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Rick. Thanks for having me again. It was great to speak to you. I hope you get to Disneyland soon. That Disneyland 100, there's going to be some very special things out there next year. Hope you're experiencing that. And hopefully speak to you soon.
This has been episode 94 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, today is the Star Wars holiday of Life Day. I made sure to secure a park pass reservation for Disney's Hollywood Studios to celebrate, and a reservation for Oga's Cantina. Make sure to be subscribed to the YouTube channel to see all of the festivities. In episode 95 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty, our good friend Marissa will be back from a hiatus to finally tackle that most controversial of topics, childless Disney adults. Two childless Disney adults ourselves will be addressing it, and we hope that we already dispel some of the misconceptions about people like us, but we will try even harder. That episode is coming up next Thursday, which is also Thanksgiving. Until then, have a great week.